The massive ship hung over New York like a metallic storm cloud, casting shadows that stretched for miles. Ambassador Chen Wei stood on the hastily constructed platform at the United Nations Plaza, her hands steady despite the weight of representing 7 billion souls. Across from her, the Zephyrian delegation towered on their anti-gravity platforms, their crystalline forms refracting the afternoon sunlight into prismatic rainbows. Humans of Earth. The lead Zephyrian's voice resonated through universal translators, each word dripping with the authority of 1,000 conquered worlds. I am High Commander Vextai of the Galactic Dominion. Your species will kneel and submit to our rule, as is the natural order of all inferior civilizations. The crowd behind the security barriers fell silent. News cameras from every nation focused on this moment that would define humanity's future. Chen Wei adjusted her glasses, nervous habit she'd never quite shaken, and took a step forward. With all due respect, High Commander, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the plaza. We have one question before we respond to your request. Vexatai's crystalline head tilted, light fracturing oddly through his translucent features. In his 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever responded with a question. They either submitted immediately or launched futile attacks. This was unprecedented. Speak quickly, primitive one, Chen Wei smiled, not the diplomatic smile she'd perfected over decades of negotiations, but something genuinely curious. Why? The simple word hung in the air like a challenge. Vextai's form shifted, crystals rearranging in what his species displayed when confused. Why what? Why should we kneel? I mean, what's the reasoning behind it? What do you get out of it? What do we get out of it? It seems like a pretty big decision to make without understanding the fundamentals. Behind Vextai, the other Zephyrians began what could only be described as agitated shimmering. One of them leaned forward to whisper something in their harmonic language. Vextai straightened, his voice taking on a more forceful tone. Because we are superior. We have conquered 1,000 worlds, commanded mighty fleets and... But why does that mean we should kneel? Chen Wei interrupted gently. I mean, you're clearly technologically advanced, and I'm sure you're very capable, but I'm still not seeing the logical connection. Could you walk me through your reasoning? The High Commander's crystalline form began cycling through colors rapidly, a sign of deep agitation among his people. We are the Dominion. We rule because we are strong. Okay, so might makes, right? Is that the philosophical framework you're working with? Chen Wei pulled out a tablet and began taking notes, as if she were in a university lecture. Because that's interesting, but it raises some questions. If might makes right, then wouldn't the mightiest individual in your society be the rightful ruler? How do you handle succession of power, and what happens when someone stronger comes along? A murmur ran through the crowd. Several people had pulled out their phones and were live streaming the exchange. Why should we kneel was already trending. Globally, Vextai's color cycling intensified. This is not, you cannot, the order is given, you will submit, but you still haven't explained why, Chen Wei said patiently. Look, I'm not saying we won't. I'm just saying we're the kind of species that likes to understand things. It's sort of our whole deal. We ask questions about everything. Why the sky is blue, why gravity works, why people fall in love, why civilizations rise and fall. So naturally, we're curious about the underlying logic of your request. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Earth's lead xenobiologist, stepped forward from the human delegation. If I may add to Ambassador Chen's question, we've been studying your species since you arrived, and you seem to have a rigid hierarchical structure. Is kneeling a cultural requirement in your society? Because if it is, we should probably understand the cultural context before we participate. Professor Liu Zhang joined them. And from a legal perspective, what exactly are the terms of this submission? Are we talking about tributary status, full incorporation into your government system, or something else entirely? The devil's in the details, as we say. More humans began stepping forward. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a philosopher from São Paulo, raised her hand. I have some questions about the ethical framework here. Are you operating under a utilitarian model, where the greatest good for the greatest number justifies conquest? Or is this more of a social Darwinist approach? Captain James Okafor, a former military officer turned conflict resolution specialist, crossed his arms. I'd like to understand your definition of conquest. Are we talking about resource extraction, cultural assimilation, military occupation, or administrative oversight? Because the implementation would be very different depending on your goals. The Zephyrian delegation was now shimmering so intensely, they looked like a disco ball convention. Vextai's voice, when he finally spoke, had lost much of its commanding authority. You're supposed to either submit or fight. This is how conquest works. According to whom? Asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, a sociologist. I mean, who wrote the rules of conquest? Because if we're all going to participate in this system, shouldn't we examine whether it's the most efficient model? Young Tommy Chen, no relation to the ambassador, a philosophy student who'd somehow made it past security, raised his hand like he was in class. Yeah, and like, if you've conquered 1,000 worlds using this system, how's that working out for you? Are the conquered worlds happy? Are they productive? Because if you're having to constantly maintain control through force, that seems like a really inefficient use of resources. The crowd began joining in. Voices rose from the security barriers. What's your employee satisfaction rating? Do you have an HR department? What's the promotion structure like? Do you offer dental? Vexitai's crystalline form had now turned a deep, confused purple. His voice cracked slightly as he spoke. This is not how any of this is supposed to work. Ambassador Chen Wei nodded sympathetically. I get that this is probably frustrating for you. Change is hard. But look at it this way. If your current system isn't getting you the results you want, maybe there's room for improvement? We're pretty good at problem solving when we work together. Maybe instead of a conquest model, we could explore a partnership. Framework? A what? Vextai's voice was barely above a whisper. Well, you clearly have amazing technology and significant resources. We have creativity, adaptability, and a talent for asking annoying questions. Seems like there might be some synergy there. What do you think? The High Commander looked around at his delegation, then at the crowd of humans who were now engaged in animated discussions about interspecies cooperation models, resource-sharing agreements, and cultural exchange programs. Someone had started a food truck. Vextai's voice was small now. I need to call my supervisor. As the massive ship retreated to a safe distance while the Zephyrian delegation held emergency conferences, humanity did what it did best. They kept asking questions, started a dozen research committees, and began planning for a universe that suddenly seemed a lot more interesting. Ambassador Chen Wei smiled as she watched the alien ship disappear behind the clouds. Sometimes the best way to change the game was simply to ask why anyone wanted to play it in the first place.